All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Investing for Retirement. I am your host, Christopher Story, along with my lovely co-host and wife, Misty Story. Today we have a special guest, Tim Herriage. Tim has over 22 years of experience in the real estate business. Has done over 2,000 deals, is very well known in the industry, and of course, he is the executive director of RCN Capital. So let's dig in. So, Tim, let's start at the top. Tell us about you and just kind of where you started and what got you involved in the real estate.
Yeah, I like to put myself down at first and just say, like, I'm a normal guy. There's nothing
Yeah.
really special about me. I grew up in a small town east of Dallas called Forney. Back then it was 3A high school, two stoplights, and the town shut down for football.
Yeah.
It was very Friday night lights type upbringing. Got out of high school, realized wasn't playing any college ball. I'm just the average looking guy. We were at a party one night, and one of my buddies was back from Navy boot camp, wearing his uniform, and was pulling all the chicks. And another buddy of mine goes, "Dude, we should join the Navy." I said, "Man, if I joined anything, it'd be the Marine Corps." So within a week, I joined the Marine Corps. Didn't really think it out. Didn't really have a reason to do it. Just sounded like the next cool thing. 5 years later, 17 countries, saw the world, saw a lot of stuff that was great, saw a lot of stuff that was awful. Decided that wasn't the life for me, and got out and put my resume on militaryhire.com. And from that post, I was hired as a project manager for another Marine that was flipping houses here in Dallas. So kind of my origin is I started out as the chuck in a truck, like was driving around, fixing people's houses. And then it got to where I helped him do the sales on the owner finance side. And then one day he said, "You want to learn the acquisition side?" And I was like, "Yeah." So the first house we bought, 811 Kelso in West Dallas, had a for rent sign nailed to a tree. And he's like, "We're going to try to buy this house." I'm thinking, man, this doesn't make sense, right? It says for rent. It's not for sale.
Yeah.
And we did the whole, I can borrow money from my parents, and can I see the house? And I never forget, though, they said they wanted, it was like $80-something thousand. And we offered, it was 43-ish on the first one. And I'm embarrassed, right? Like, I mean, it's like, it's just an insult. And they came back on their first counter at like 63,000. And I remember the significance of that because literally in a day, they had decided to take less than I had made the year before as a Marine in combat, right? It was my beginning of understanding what's a lot of money to some people isn't a lot of money to others. We ended up buying a house for like 48,000. I was hooked. Did a bunch of acquisitions work. My next job in the industry, I went and worked for a Home Investors, We Buy Ugly Houses guy, and I was his buyer. We would call it today the acquisition manager.
Mm-hmm.
Bought 111 houses for him that year, increased his volume. He was like at 70 the year before. And wholesaled 80 of them myself. That was kind of when I learned, I think they call it reverse wholesaling now. It's like, I knew I got paid $800 to buy it and $700 to sell it. So I needed to find a way to sell everything so I could make $1,500 a deal. Like that was kind of the math I used.
Yeah.
And so I'd go to these REIAs and I'd just speed date. I'd run around like, "What are you looking for? Where? What's your numbers?" And I would just work the whole crowd. And so it got to where by the end of that first year, as a full-time buyer, I mean, I pulled up to the house and knew who I was selling it to and how much they'd pay.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just, I had to get you down to the right number so that I could make enough money that my boss would sign off on it and I could make my $1,500. Like,
When you were doing that, were you having to, was he providing you some leads, or were you having to go knock doors? Like at that time, because it's early on. It's not your business.
Right,
It's someone else's.
Yeah.
How were you having to source that stuff?
Well, he was a Home Investors franchise, so they had the billboards and all
Right.
that. So there were leads coming in like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I would knock doors. I would, like, when we were fixing a house, I'd go over there and like put door hangers out on all the houses around. And I had this little package that I carried around with. They call it driving for dollars now.
Yep.
If I saw a house with high grass or mail piled up, I'd go put a door hanger on it, put my business card, knock, go next door. "Hey, what's the deal with that house?" It was fun, man. But I through all that networking, I saw that the people in this business that really had money
Mm-hmm.
were the ones that were keeping rental properties, right? And I told Bobby, my boss back then, I was like, Bobby, man, I want to keep rentals. And he said, stick with me for a year and then we'll find a way to do it. And we'll partner together. I was like, awesome. So I'm 22, 23, pretty young at the time. And year goes by, I go to Bobby. I'm like, hey, man, like, I just made you #1 in the nation. Like, we're making a killing. I made 6 figures. I was like, I want to keep some rentals. And he's like, nah. This is working too good. We're just going to keep wholesaling. So I quit. My dad, oh my God, he just thought I was crazy.
Was he keeping any rentals himself?
Bobby? Yeah, he would keep some, but I wasn't part of that.
Yeah.
And so then there was a local hard money guy that had financed a lot of our transactions named Scott Horne, really good friend of mine. You should have him on the show.
We did actually.
Oh, did you?
Dude, Scott was fucking amazing.
So,
I love just Scott, his stories and just his, yeah.
So Scott's still my primary mentor. I mean, he and I talk all the time. Man, I'm going to get sidetracked. So we realized last week I was closing an owner finance transaction up there with Scott, and we were sitting around talking. I was like, dude, you realize it's been 20 years since we partnered, because we started Sprint Partners LP in 2003. And he's like, wow. Yeah. I said, yeah. So I'll be 45. That means you were 45 when we met, because he's exactly 20 years older than me.
Right.
And Dwayne Marable, the guy that had kind of ran all our projects, was exactly 20 years older than Scott. So it was kind of always that funny thing. I was like, so I'm 45. So that means you're 65 now, Scott. Are you on Medicare yet? And like, I was jazzing him. And Dwayne's 85, still comes around every now and then. So yeah, it was really funny to see. Like, I went home that night and I was talking to my wife, Jennifer. I was like, I am now in the seat where Scott was when I met him. And like, he was bigger than the world, like back then to me. I mean, the guy owned 300 something houses and was a hard money lender. And I mean, I was just enamored, right? And the fact that he actually offered me a partnership in 2003, it just changed my life, right? And we built a 60 house portfolio in 2 years. Like, when you have that kind of juice behind you, right? And so that was great. But then I met my wife. And in my home office, the assignment of contract hangs in front of my desk. She called me about a house, and to date myself here, I was like, yeah, I'll buy it. And I already knew who I was going to sell it to. And I was like, I'll come by and sign the assignment. She goes, I don't even have an assignment, because all she had ever done was flip. She didn't assign houses. And I was like, oh, well, I'll have my office fax it to you. Fax. Like on the assignment, it still got the fax header. And my son was like, why did you print the numbers on the top of the sheet? I was like, man, that's the way faxes worked. So she made like $3,500. I made like $8,000. So the joke is we got married to keep it all in the family. She owned a HomeVestor franchise at the time. So then I left the partnership with Scott very amicably, right? I just, decided I want to go work with my wife, because we got married pretty quick. Started flipping houses, became #1 in the nation for HomeVestors. In 2007, I did 143 flips up until August, when the subprime market collapsed. Had 38 vacant houses, sold almost every one of them for a loss. Jennifer and I lost like $1 million that quarter. And then first quarter 2008, lost another $1 million. And that's not like Blackstone's money. That's not daddy's money. Like, that's what I had spent.
Right.
It was like every dollar that I had made and kept was gone. We avoided foreclosure on everything through a series of, this is a very important story, it's relevant. In 2007, I was too big for my britches. I thought I knew everything, had never experienced a down market. And a guy from HomeVestors Corporate called and said, hey, Jefferson Bank wants to meet with you. And I was like, nah, Fred, I'm good. I got enough money. He goes, boy, you never know when a bank's going to tell you to go to hell. You need to meet with Jefferson Bank. And I said, yes, sir. Right? Like, because Mr. Burley, like, when he said something like that, you just say yes, sir. We'll fast forward to April 2008. First Bank of Canyon Creek called a line of credit due with my wife and I. It's not a line of credit. It's actually it was a series of notes. And a lot of people out there don't understand that bank loans have call features. People can call, a lot of these banks can call your loan at any time. And they did. And they called mine and Jennifer's loans. It was about $408,000 on, I want to say 6 houses, if I remember correctly. But, yeah, they call that line due, and it's April 2008. There's no money anywhere. I mean, there's no such thing as, like, you couldn't just call the national RCN guys. It didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And the only bank that was still loaned to me at that time was Jefferson Bank. So, like, had I not went and looked for that relationship when I didn't need it, it wouldn't have been there when I needed it, and I would have
Mhm.
ended up getting foreclosed on.
And you almost didn't want to take the call.
I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah.
Mr. Burley had to tell me to do it.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, though, what people don't understand is they're thinking, well, they'd never call my loans due because I'd pay my bills. Well, it was actually the opposite. Those of us that were paying and on time and fully leased were the ones that got called, right? The people that were behind, they got workouts. I found that out a couple years later. That bank gave all the people workouts that had the crappy portfolios and weren't making their payments. They got modifications and all that. Me, I had to like go through like heart surgery to get the deal paid off. So, and then 09 happens. My 13-year-old now was born. And, you know, we got lucky that we made it out of that time period married. A lot of my friends didn't. And so I kind of became a stay-at-home dad in 09. I took care of the kid. My wife was an REO agent. She was selling bank-owned houses and making a pretty good living. Now, we did live in this $1 million house that was very, we were definitely house poor at the time because we weren't making the kind of money we'd made before. And then coming out of 09 into 10, I missed networking. I missed the Homevestors conventions because we had left the Homevestors system in early 09. We were out of money. We were like, yeah, guys, here's the keys. Have fun.
Yeah.
And my wife had cancer during that time period. So it was just 08 and 09 was horrible. But we stayed together and we got through it. And so then in late 2010, I decided I was going to start this little company called the REI Expo. The REI Expo was just meant to be a trade show in Dallas that was going to get everybody in the community together. So I got all the REIA leaders to all work together on one big event. And in January of 11, we had like 220 people there. It was awesome. The next year, we do another one in 2012, and we've got 400 something people there. And then this magazine publisher's like, Tim, you got this is the sauce, dude. You need to take it national. I was like, no. He was like, well, at least do one in Houston. I was like, all right. So August of 12, we do one in Houston. Same thing, 200 people show up. I was like, all right, well, that was the first in Dallas, so it's going to work. Got all the REIAs to help. And then 2013 is the year that kind of my trajectory changed unknowingly. Well, now we have 800 people at the Dallas one. So we've doubled and then doubled again. And I decided, forget it. I'm taking this thing national. We're going to go to Baltimore, and then we're going to go to Chicago, and then we're going to go to California. So the ball, and it was just like clockwork, 200, or 250, 250, 250. Well, now when you get back around to 2014, the DFW one doubled again and had like 1,800 people there. So now, I mean, that's a big show, especially back then because we didn't have social media and stuff really to like
push it,
promote. Yeah, I mean, like there was no like Facebook group like come see my event, right? Like I had billboards up, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But through the 2013 Dallas show, I kind of just went a year ahead and I went back. I met this attorney named Julie Pettit, and Julie did the contracts for the 5-Star Conference, and that's the biggest REO real estate conference in the nation. And she introduced me to the owner of that. So she's like, this Tim guy, he's great on stage. He runs a great event. You ought to have him speak at the expo. And he was like, Tim, I would love it if you spoke. And this is where I'm a huge networker and it's all about connections. He's like, I'd love it if you spoke to our group of Fannie Mae and, high-end executives about the power of this individual investor in the American real estate market. I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And I called my buddy, the magazine publisher, Andrew Waite, that had gotten me to, take the thing national. I said, hey, you did that survey last year, the Invaluable Investor Survey. Do you mind if I use that as the content that I present at this show? He was like, yeah, as long as I get like, 7-inch credits on, it's like, fine, dude. Like I'll put your logo on every slide. All right, perfect. So we did that. And at that speech, the founder and chairman of Invitation Homes, the Blackstone arm that, owns 83,000 houses now. They're not owned by Blackstone anymore. The chairman and founder was in that audience. And after my speech, which I did, I feel like I did a good job. Oh, I have to stop. I have to go back to that morning. That morning, I'm getting dressed in my closet, suited up, booted up, red tie on, ready to go kill it. And just this wave of nervousness came over me.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome just set in. I almost didn't go.
Hmm.
I felt like I didn't belong in that crowd. I felt like they were going to see right through me, that I was just presenting someone else's information, right? Like I really it was this moment. Like I'll never forget that feeling. And I looked down, and there's one of my Marine Corps coins, one of my favorite coins. And I just grabbed that coin, and I was like, I kind of said to myself, you committed to do this. You will not quit. You will show up and do your best. And put my coin in my pocket, and I went to the thing. So anyway, I feel like I did a really good job at the presentation. And after the presentation, the chairman and CEO, Nick Gould at the time, waited in line to talk to me. Because, you get done speaking to a room full of a couple hundred people, there's a line.
Yeah.
He waits in line. This guy owns billions in houses. Billions.
And he's waiting in line.
Yeah. And,
to talk to
at
you.
that time, he was one of the owners of the number 2 multifamily. He had bought Trammell Crow's multifamily. It was called Riverstone. So this guy owns hundreds of thousands of doors across London or the United Kingdom and America. I mean, probably 200, 300,000 doors, right? Big time guy. And he waits in line, and he comes up, and he's British. I have to do it this way. Nick, if you're listening, I'm sorry, dude. He goes, so we're working on a project and we need your help. And I'm like, who are you? He's kind of a shorter man, and he pulls out his business card, and he goes, Invitation Homes, and he hands me his card. And at that time, all of us that were active in the business didn't call it Invitation Homes. We called it Blackstone, right? Nobody really knew the name of the company. And so he hands me this business card, and it says Chairman and CEO. And every article I had read for the past 2 years about Blackstone and mentioning Invitation Homes, flooded through my frontal lobe. And right as that happens, he goes, Blackstone. I'm like, oh my God, how can I help you? How can I be of service? Crazy whirlwind. I'm in their office the next day, meeting with their board, and then they're conferencing in the guys from New York at Blackstone on Skype, and I'm not even realizing the significance of it. The guy he wanted me to talk to in New York wasn't available. So I'm like, yeah, sure, we'll do a call or something. Zoom wasn't a thing, right?
Right, it was Skype.
Yeah, it was Skype. And so I'm walking out to the elevator, and here comes this billionaire chasing me. Hey, Tim, we got Jazz on the phone. And next thing you know, I go back in. I'm just gonna blow this meeting that's worth millions and millions of dollars for me futurely. Anyway, within a couple weeks, we fly up to New York. We meet with the folks at Blackstone. Another out-of-body imposter syndrome experience. I called my dad for advice because he's big. He was a corporate guy, and he's like, "Do not wear your boots." And I'm like, Dad, I have nice boots. He goes, "Do not wear your boots." And I said, "Yes, sir." So I had to go buy a pair of dress shoes for that meeting. But I'm standing there in the lobby. I'm in this suit. It's my wedding suit, the only suit I own at the time, because we don't wear suits.
Yeah.
And I'm in this lobby on the 43rd floor on Park Avenue. 40-foot mahogany walls, and Central Park's just completely, and I'm just like, what the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here.
I left my boots at home, thank God.
Yeah, and we go to this meeting, and if I'm going too long, tell me to stop.
Oh, no.
Right.
Let's let it ride. You're good.
We go into this meeting, and it is this table that is 30 or 40 feet long, and there's all these analysts sitting around, and they're probably paying the people in this room $20,000 an hour. When you
Does it
really
look like a movie.
Yeah.
You're like, what the
and
fuck?
they sit me at the head of the table, and Nick's here to my left, and then big dog Blackstone guy comes in, and then big dog Blackstone guy comes in, and then the boss comes in, and Nick is like a puppet master.
Yeah.
Okay, tell him this, and I answer whatever it was we had talked about, and he's okay. Now tell him this, and I'd tell him that, and he just kept telling me what to say, and I kept saying it. 5 minutes in, the big boss says, "Hey, man, nice to meet you. Got to bounce." He gets up and leaves. I'm like, all right. I flew up here. thanks for your 5 minutes. And then the next guy gets up and says, hey, man, I'm going to bounce too. Good to meet you. Hope we do something. And he walks out. I'm thinking, what the hell are we going to do? Like, nobody's even told. Like, I thought I was just like, I don't know. And then the last important guy gets up and says, all right, I got to bounce too. So I've been in there 15 minutes at this point. Nick says, okay, Tim, let's go. And I get up, I follow Nick to the elevator. He doesn't get on the elevator. He's like, okay, thanks, good job, we'll talk soon. And he hits the button and I leave.
You're standing in the elevator looking at it and going, this it's just like,
I'm telling you,
bye, mate.
That's it.
You got dismissed.
And at that point, I go downstairs and my return flight's like 10 hours from now.
So you're just thinking, what the fuck just happened?
And they've got a car waiting on me. I get in the car. I call my wife. I'm like, I'm done. And she goes, what the hell did you do wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't hear from her for a couple weeks. And I'm thinking, like, I've really botched this up. I don't want to follow up. It's almost like dating, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, then one day I get an email from Nick, like, okay, we want you to come on board as a consultant, help us run the thing in 90 days or so. Maybe you can just help run the thing. Or come on as a consultant, help us get the thing started. After 90 days or so, maybe you can help run the thing. I'm like, all right. He was like, so email me what you can do and how much. And so I typed this very thoughtful paragraph. My wife and I do it like 100 times, right? Like we're going over. And then I just pull a number out of my ass. I mean, it's like, I don't know, this much a month. And I email it over. No, got it. No questions, nothing. Like the next week, I get an email from someone I've never heard about. His name's Jeff Tennyson. He is the now the CEO of Lima One Capital. And he was the CEO at the time of B2R Finance LP, which was like this name they had come up with. I don't even think that was the name. I don't remember. But the first paragraph, the job description, is verbatim what I sent. And the compensation is exactly what I asked for. There was no conversation, no discussion. I'd never even talked to this guy that had just signed on as the CEO.
Yeah.
It was just surreal.
They don't got time for that shit, right? They're like yeah, a 5-minute meeting, 15 minutes, we're done. I'm out. Decisions are made. Whatever you want to give it to them.
It was a $1 billion decision in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's insane. And I signed that consulting contract on October 23rd, 2013. I remember that because it's my son's birthday. They sent it to me on my son's birthday. And my life changed. And next thing you know, like, well, first off, for the first month, they only had me on like one call a week, like for an hour. And I'm thinking, man, you are paying me a lot of money. Like, I thought this was going to be full time. And then we started going to some conferences, going up to New York and stuff. And I was in Chicago in late December and working on the expo, actually. And Nick called and said, all right, we want you to be the managing director. Here's your equity. Here's what this looks like. And man, it was just, then we were off to the races. So I sold the expo because I wasn't going to have time for that.
Yeah.
To Think Realty. So now it's the Think Realty Expo, if you've heard of that. Eddie and his team has done a great job continuing that brand. Yeah, and then I started B2R. We went from 3 people. When I joined, I think I was number 2 or 3. I can't remember if Allie was full-time yet. By late 2015, when I left, we had done a couple billion in loans, already done a new securitization. We created the DSCR platform that exists today, portfolio and single asset. I built it. I'm very proud of it. It's now Finance of America, was just sold to Rock. We took it public in 2021, and I had been borrowing money from Jeff Tesh, the founder and CEO of RCN Capital, for about 5 years. We became really good friends. And after the IPO and after COVID, he called me up and was like, hey, man, like, come get involved in what we're doing. Come do it again, man. And I was like, nah, man. It was funny. I'll never forget the day. He's like, what are you doing with your time? I was like, I'm day trading and, I've got some Airbnbs. And he's like, that's such a waste of your talent. Let's talk. And so we met at the 5-Star Conference in 2021, hammered out the deal. I joined RCN as the executive director in December of 21. In 21, the company broke $1 billion for the first time annually. And in 22, which was a horrible lending market, right? Rising rates, all that. We did I think 1.4 ish billion, and we have our sights set on 1.7 this year.
That's killer. That's
we
good.
we we want to be, and it's still not a great environment to be lending, right, with rising rates and the amnesia people suffer from. We do fix and flip financing, long-term rental financing, and ground-up construction financing for single-family properties, multifamily properties, and some limited mixed-use properties in 45 states.
So I want to back up because that's a killer story. Just, I mean, from start to finish, kind of how you started, how you.
You didn't know it was going to take 25 minutes, though,
No,
did you?
man. Hey, I like it, man. That's why I'm like, I want you to let it out, because there's a lot of things kind of to unpack and talk about there, and I kind of want to back up to the beginning stages. So,
Yep.
kind of when you were you because mentioned Scott Horne and stuff, kind of what that was. So where it sounds like a lot of your education came just before you even started on a personal level doing a lot of your own stuff. You were learning. You were going to work to learn, basically. You were getting paid by individuals. And then by the time you met Scott, that's when is that about when you started to say, I'm going to start building my own,
Yeah.
so to say? So what was that like? Just kind of working with Scott? How did you guys, I mean, what was your, I know he's a big mentor of yours.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I'm a student of the game.
Yeah.
And Chris, I'm still a student of the game.
Mhm.
I soak up every piece of content I can get my hands on. I learn something new every week. I feel like not enough people are willing to be vulnerable and just be like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell are you talking about? I remember when we started B2R, I'm in this conference room in New York, and the president, John Beecham, good friend of mine, he owns Turok Capital now, and he goes, well, it's a DSCR loan. And I go, no, I don't. He goes, you know a DSCR? I go, no. He's like, you got to know what a DSCR is. You've been doing this for a long time. I said, well, I don't. Like, I mean, so tell me what it is or stop saying it. I mean,
Yeah.
and one of the compliments Jeff Tennyson paid me later in the cycle of building that company is he said, the thing I love about you is you are never afraid to say when something doesn't make sense or you don't understand something, but you don't just stop there. You need to know the information. And I think the military part of me goes back to that. I mean, as an intelligence guy, I had to brief generals sometimes.
Right.
And just saying, I don't know isn't an option to a general, right? But if you don't know, you don't make that crap up. You say, sir, I do not have the answer to that at this time. I will get it to you by the end of the day, or I'll get it to you before as soon as this briefing's over. And when you say it, like, the general really appreciates it. He knows you're not making stuff up, but also your team in the back of the room, they're like, oh, we better go figure that out, right? Like, so I think I just carried that into with Scott, and Scott's such a wealth of knowledge. And now that I've been doing this 20 years, which he had whenever I met him, I realized that sometimes I speak from like my level of comprehension and understanding,
Right.
instead of like the level of comprehension and understanding of the audience. And Scott was great at being patient with me and letting me, like, what are you talking about? Amortization? Like, how's that shit work? Like,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to double wrap and da-da-da. No. Got to show me that. Like, oh, well, we need to, he taught me how to, like, we budgeted everything. Scott's so meticulous. If we made a $10,000 assignment fee in that company, we would do 10% for what we called the kitty, which was like, it's just conditional money. It's just money you set aside and you save, right? And then we budget, 20 or 25% for marketing, and then we would budget, some whatever else for expenses. And it got down to where, corporately, he really kind of taught me like net retained revenue and what the net income was, because you had to put that money aside. And then we would split, that 50% of the 10, right? We'd split the 5, not the 10. And he was very patient, and I would want to sell something to make quick cash, and he'd be like, no. We need to keep this one. We need to keep this one. We need to keep this. Don't keep that one. Like, just you learn so much more by doing than talking or watching. And I think, I probably had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder-ish, that I didn't feel like, I didn't come from a family with money. I don't have a financial education. I knew that and we didn't have Bigger Pockets or YouTube or, any of that. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it was YouTube back then, but like it wasn't even owned by Google. It was like a
It just started out.
yeah,
That's like early 2000s.
yeah. So, you know, you had to learn by diving in, but getting to learn with guidance, I think was uh, it was huge to my success. Absolutely.
It sped things up. You feel that it made it just, I mean, it was a versus just kind of learn on your own out there figuring it out.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, so I go back to Corporal Dennis. This would have been in 1998. I was being promoted to corporal, and Corporal Dennis was someone that I really looked up to. And I went to him. I said, "Corporal, I'm going to be a NCO, a non-commissioned officer now." And you know, I've never really been a leader. I mean, I was in charge of my I mean, I was the head linebacker. Like, I guess that's kind of like, whatever. And he's like, "Herriage, it's easy, man. Like, just take what every leader you've ever been under did wrong in your eyes and try not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then take everything they did right in your eyes and try to do that. And that's leadership in a box." And I was like, that makes perfect sense. So I kind of applied that same philosophy to business. And I have like, it's what would Scott do? What would Nick do? What would, this guy do? What would that guy do? Like, and I still today, like, my wife will even say, well, what would Nick do? Like, because I want to just copy people. I mean, I copied Scott to get where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really want to copy Scott from this point forward. I love him. I mean, but he's kind of just in his small little Texas box, right?
Yeah.
I want to do 10 billion a year, and to do 10 billion a year, I gotta copy what Nick did, right?
Yeah.
And then if I get to there, then when I get to there, I gotta copy someone else. I mean, I think getting your hands dirty, working with people that have been where you want to be, is the quickest way to skip the rungs on the ladder and make sure that you have kind of a safety harness as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the success. It leaves clues. And so you look and you're like, Scott's done this. And then you kind of move around. When we had Scott on, we laughed about it earlier. We always laugh about it because we love his thing is he was telling the story when he started to loan money, and he tells his partner, "Hey, we're gonna loan money," and the partner's like, we don't have any money to loan." He's like, "We'll figure it out."
Yeah.
I was like, I love it. To me, that's like, we'll figure it out. Like, we'll get there. And
dude, like, look, I've got this owner finance note right now that I text Scott about 2 days ago. It's like, "Hey, I bought this house for $175. We sold it for $250. I'm getting 10% down, 11% interest. How do you want me to structure it?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I'm going to sell you the first note, so I'm going to keep a second. So you just tell me how you want me to structure it." He goes, "Well, don't you want to let me look at it?" I said, "No, trust me, dude, you got it. Like but I'm just going to figure it out. Like, I know him enough that I know that he'll find a way to structure it to where it works for him. And I'll get to make, 20, 30 grand now and keep 50 grand in cash flow for the next 5-6 years." So.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Blackstone a little bit and what that, because I know some people may listen to this and they go, for some people they hear that and it's like I don't want to say it's like a ghost. Like, who's Blackstone? You just hear the name Blackstone. You're like, I don't know who those people are, but I know those people control a lot of shit. So what was it like working with them and kind of going through those years for you and building all the BTR and all that? What was that like?
It's funny. A lot of smaller entrepreneurs that are teaching or creating content will use the phrase "money loves speed."
Mm-hmm.
Money does not love speed. Money loves confidence. And I'll never forget, I was standing on the corner of a cool day. I was having lunch with one of the Blackstone guys, the guy that was in charge of the fund that we were paid out of. So Blackstone is an entity, is a publicly traded company, but then they have other real estate funds underneath their umbrella and other like opportunity funds and all that. And we were out of the Tactical Opportunities Fund. And a gentleman by the name of Jazz Cara was in charge of our investment, because like B2R was just an investment for Blackstone. Like, yeah, we'll put $500 million into that. Like, well, Jazz was in charge of that. And so we were having lunch one day. And so he's kind of like my boss's boss, right? And good lunch, and we're leaving, and I'm on my way over to the Madison Square Garden. They've got us, ice level suites and stuff. And at that time, so by the way, I come from a very, very humble family. At that time, Blackstone still owned Hilton, and Hilton owned the Waldorf Astoria. So, you've heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has.
Yeah.
Like every time I went to New York, just stayed in a suite and
Yeah.
they knew that I worked for the company that owned their building. It was like it was Gordon Gekko shit every time I went.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, what the? I mean, and then you're like, it's me. I'm just a redneck from Dallas.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. So as we're leaving and I'm on my way over to the hockey game, Jazz says, Tim, look, what you got to understand is we know you cannot be right all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We know. He goes, at Blackstone, we hire the smartest people in the world. And they do. They hire the most genius human beings, and they pay them very well and take great care of them.
It takes 5 minutes for them to interview them, and that's it.
And here's the deal, though. He said, what we know is we cannot be right all the time. The best we can do is 70%. He goes, the key is don't bullshit me. Acknowledge what is or isn't working and stop it. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. Little ego, little pride, little fear of failure. You got to understand the way they became the behemoth is they're cool with failure. It's expected.
Mm-hmm.
What's not expected is to continue making bad mistakes once you realize they were mistakes, right?
Right.
And so for me, it was relieving. Right? Like, oh, cool. I don't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, I just got to be right 70% of the time. That's easy. Right? And so, and that's kind of where some of my, I'd say, mentality has come from these days of, I know I'm going to screw up. Like, it's fine. Like, we'll just figure it out. Like, almost like Scott said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what people have to understand is, as an entrepreneur, we start expecting perfect behavior. And think about Major League Baseball, right? If you were able to get on base 30% of the time you ever reach the plate, you're in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
With a 70% failure rate, you're in the Hall of Fame. And we as investors, we as entrepreneurs, like we feel like we put ourselves in positions where we don't have backups, we don't have exit strategies, we don't have ways out. And then you're basically striking for perfect every time, and it's not doable.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that. They know that when they're spending $1 billion, they could lose $300 million.
Yeah.
But as long as they cut it at $300 million and don't lose the $1 billion, the other $1 billion expense makes them $200 or $300 million, and then another $1 billion thing makes them $200 or $300 million, right? So like if you do $1 billion 10 times and 3 of them lose $300 million, right? But the other 7 make $300 million, right? You lost $900 million, but then you made $2.1 billion. So you came out pretty good.
They know. So the idea, the concept of they're not afraid of failure. It's
Right.
just that simple concept of they're not afraid of failure, and they're willing, and they just know when to cut it. They
Right.
say, we're just going to cut it right there. That's it, and no more.
Think about it. They bought $1 billion worth of single family houses in 2012, with no idea that they were going to be able to even securitize it, get their money back. Was the market going to keep collapsing? Now, look, they've got a lot of data and information and analysts advising them, and they make great decisions. But still, I mean, that's a pretty big bet, right? $5 billion worth of houses in California and Arizona.
Yeah. So I want to kind of run through just like kind of on your own personal. So let me ask this. So what made you? And I think you might have mentioned it, but what made you say, okay, I'm done. I just want to stop. Like I've been working for Blackstone all these years, and now or working with Invitation Homes and all. I've been working for the company.
Yeah.
You've been working for them. What made you say, I'm ready to? I don't want to say retire, but I'm ready. Was it just? What made you go? I'm out.
I think one of my strengths is I know my personality set,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I am an amazing maverick, visionary, builder, creator, whatever you want to say. I suck at managing things.
Yeah.
Like hell on earth to me would be having an office to go to every day and fill out like personnel evaluations and deal with people's problems.
Yeah.
Like that would be hell on earth with me. And at B2R, I was the managing director and I headed up all sales, marketing, and business development.
Mm-hmm.
So the chief marketing officer worked for me. The senior VP of sales worked for me, right? The VP of business development worked for me. And so I had 100 plus people in my tree.
Mm-hmm.
and I would have to fly to Charlotte to fire someone, or I'd have to fly to LA to give someone a performance improvement program, or I'd have to fly to New York to pat someone on the back and say good job. Like it's not my thing.
Yeah.
I don't manage people. I don't like to manage people. I hate stupid questions. It's just not my thing. So I built it. I got it where it was ready for phase, I'd say 3 or 4. We hired a new CEO. He had sold a company to Amex. His dad was the founder of MasterCard. He was kind of the next phase of the company. We were going to go for a fintech type thing. It was just time. It was just time. Culturally, it became about optimization, not growth, right? It became about systemization, not creation. And that's just not my deal. So once we had the CEO, and then we hired a new CMO, and then, I mean, cultural, and we bought a couple companies. It just culturally, it was time. So I resigned in, I don't think I made it 18 months. I don't know. What is it? Close to 18 months. Oh, more than that. Yeah, like 20 months. I don't know. It was June of 2015 when I resigned. And I started October of 2013. So it was time. It was becoming corporate, and I don't do well in corporate. But as my lovely wife would say, when you know what you don't want, you know what you want. And so that experience allowed me to craft my involvement in RCN to where it's just me.
Right.
No one knows what the executive director does at RCN. I mean, I'm not even in the org chart. Like, they leave me out of stuff. Right? Like, some people think, like, oh, are you Jeff's boss? I'm like, no, Jeff's the CEO and founder. He's my boss. But it's a cool title.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even have a C title. Like, ooh, what are you? Like, are you on the board? Like, nah, man, just don't worry about it. Like, I speak for the company, right?
I'm here.
And I'm here to help, right? So I don't have any employees at RCN. Nobody works for me. Nobody reports to me. I don't have an office. Like I said to you before we started, I drove here from Rockwall today. I had to put on clothes. I'm on so many Zooms. I have to get dressed every day from the waist up. But you know, it's great. I travel and it had gotten at B2R where I had to travel. Like I had to travel. Like I had an office, and I had these people that needed to see me and meetings to go to. Whereas now, you know, Jeff and I were very much on the same page. Like we're not going to travel for the sake of travel, but if it's something important, I have no problem getting on a plane. Right. Like Friday, I'm jumping down to Houston. There's a Heroes coaching event that Tim Mai is doing. Tim's a good friend of mine. We're in a mastermind together. And there's a lot of the real estate coaches from around the nation going to be there. So it kind of starts on Thursday and kind of goes through Saturday. I'm going to arrive around 8 a.m. on Friday, and I'm going to network and communicate all day. And then I'm going to fly home on Friday night. Yeah. And then on Saturday, I'm going to spend all day at a baseball tournament with my son.
You get to do more of what you want now versus before you're having to.
Oh, I was on the 5 a.m. to Charlotte almost every Monday, and I wasn't home till midnight on Friday.
Yeah.
I became very unentrepreneurial very quick. I became a corporate guy.
Yeah.
And Jeff, being a great friend of mine, he made sure that I did not take on anything, and he still does. Because I don't know how to do things halfway. I'll be like, oh, I need to. He's like, Tim, that's not what you want. Remember, man, like, you know, you're here for a very specific purpose. So I breathe and pour myself into our team. We've got an amazing team of people. We got 300 employees on 3 continents. I hop on the morning calls and tell people what's going on in the real estate market, what the customers are saying, what I'm hearing. I go do stuff like this, where, you know, I'll give people listening advice, like, don't sell ever. Like, don't sell. Just be yourself and provide value without expectation, and the great things will come to you, right? I mean, so I come do this, and I'll do some Zooms and I do some podcasts. We have our own podcast, Uncontested Investing. I go to trade shows, a lot of trade shows. And when I go, just like I got my career started, I'm still the way. I'm a connector. I'm going to work the room. I'm going to go around. Like, I know real quick if we can do business together. And if we can, I'm going to drag you over to my booth. I'm going to hand you off to a salesperson. And then I'm going to go find someone else. Right. And once I run out of finding people, I'm going to go find my friends at the bar. Like, that's just the way I work these shows. And so
for you, it's, I reeled them all in. See y'all later. I'm at the bar. But when you show up at the bar, they know he did his job.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great way to say it. But also, our loan officers are so smart.
Yeah.
They work so hard at reading hundreds of pages of guidelines and products, and they talk to thousands of customers every month. You would much rather talk to them about your loan file than me.
Yeah.
Because, like, look, I read the guidelines, but I don't read them every day, right? I don't quote loans out every day and see where leverage points and FICO points and all that's falling. Like, that's not my job. And, you know, sometimes I feel like people may think I'm big dogging them or whatever. Like, I'm happy to talk to you in generalities. And but once it gets down to a quote, like, you don't want me doing that. I mean, we don't want to start our relationship off wrong.
Yeah.
So I'll tell people, like, email me. On the way here, somebody called about a mixed-use building. I kind of talked them through the general stuff. And I was like, look, email me, and I'll get my team to call you. Well, which one? Which team? I said, I don't know yet. I'm going to forward it to the VP of sales and say, pick the right person for this person and this product and have them call them. And then the VP is like, I don't need to do his job. He's a badass. Chris has been with the company for over 10 years. Why would I try to, like, pick a salesperson?
Yeah.
Send it to Chris, right? Like, and it's like Erica, the chief marketing officer. Why would I ever try to do her job? She's helped build this company. Like, let her do her thing, right? And, you know, the CFO. I make introductions for him. Like, I mean, we were talking to some big money people the other day, but like once we make the introduction, like, I hang up. Like, there's no need for me to be on that call. I don't need it. My ego straight. I don't even need to know what happened with it.
Yeah.
I mean, if the CFO can't figure it out, like, you know,
if your job is, if you could say anything with RCN, your job is the connector. That would be as you. Like, if they were to say, this is what he does all day, if you were to title it out, would that be the case? You're like,
I'm the connector and the translator.
And translator.
Right. Because we'll have our managers meetings, and sometimes it's human nature, and everyone in every business will have this problem. The customer-facing people want to make everything about the customer, right? The non-customer-facing people want to make everything about the process internally, right? And the finance people want to make everything about the finance. And we've got a great culture. That's not unilaterally true. There's a lot of people that really care. Like, the other day, our head underwriter was talking about, hey, like Tim said, there's an opportunity to cross-sell and upsell here. We already have their bank accounts, their credit report. You know, we need to be offering fix and flip lines of credit to these people when they close a rental loan. And, like, for the underwriter to say that, like, that's a great cultural thing. But sometimes when you're overwhelmed and you have to close 300 loans in a day, it's easy to talk about, oh, we need to change this process and have this, and this happen. It's like, whoa, these pesky customers, we got to keep them happy. You know, I mean, like, we can't just run off the pesky customers. So, you know, it's always a balancing act. I want to make money. Right. And so as a lender, there's three ways you make money. There's three things you have to do to make money. Number one, you got to make loans, right? Like, if you're not making loans, you're not making money. Number two, they have to be profitable loans, right? You have to loan that money out at more than that money cost you, right? So if I'm paying my equity guy 6% and I loan it to you for 5%, that's stupid, right? Unless it's a 6-month loan and I get 5 points or something like that, right? Like, it's just the math doesn't math. Well, and then the third part is you have to feel like the loan's going to be repaid, right? Like, it's just, we're not a loan-to-own company. I'm very proud that we don't have a lot of foreclosures. And the only ones that we have foreclosures, honestly, if you're a borrower out there, if you're in trouble, you got to talk to your lender, right? Like, because my friend Kent Clothier said, in the absence of information, people assume the worst thing for themselves, the worst possible outcome for themselves, right? So as a lender, if you stop talking to me and you won't take my call, I have to assume that, are you trashing the house? Did you just leave it unlocked? Are you going to burn it down? Are you going to strip it for parts? Like, now, if you call, like, I'm out of money, I can't pay my interest. I can't finish the rehab. I can say, okay, well, let's look. Like, you owe me, it looks like your loan to value right now as is around 70. Have you tried to list it as is? Now, I don't have this conversation. People at our company do.
Right.
But it's the culture, right? To give you a great example, we were at the IMN conference in December of last year, and this young lady who now runs one of the largest green housing companies in the Southeast, they build better homes. She came up to Jeff and said, "You don't know this, but in a previous relationship of mine, somebody ran off with a bunch of money, and you worked my deal out for me and helped me get out of it." And like, that culture's still there today. I mean, we're not as small as we were, 10 years ago.
Right.
And Jeff's probably not going to be the one on the phone working it out, but the culture stays the same.
Yeah. But it was always, hey, you'll work it out.
We're going to work it out if you communicate and are honest, right? But like with all things, if you don't communicate and you're dishonest, like.
So something I want to ask that and I've heard you say this. I hear a lot of people say it. Anytime we talk to different investors, it's almost like they almost say the same thing, and it's I wish I would have kept one more, or I wouldn't have sold. And you said it, and I know, again, I've heard others say the same thing. I wish I would have held on to more, or I sold too many. That's something that anytime I struggle with not selling the damn thing. To me, I'm like, that was a lot of fucking work. I want to keep it. Like,
right.
So, I mean, kind of go through that. I mean, because I hear that a lot. I never want to have that regret that I sold something and I should have kept it, But then at the same time, I'm like, well, man, I probably should have sold some shit. You know? So, I mean, kind of, what's your take on that? As far as, do you have a certain kind of number you try to hit wholesale wise, and hey, and then you try to, like, do you have a certain kind of, I don't want to say it's like gotta be this number, but you're like, I want to add a certain number to your a year to your portfolio kind of thing. You don't have to say the number, but do you have that kind of, like?
Well, so number one, I've been really trying to share this lately. It's not how many, it's how much, right? So we look at our balance sheet from an equity standpoint, a net worth standpoint, not necessarily a number of assets standpoint now. Now, when you look back 20 years ago, you've probably heard me say, if you just force yourself when you're getting started to keep one more a month, one more a quarter, one more a year, whatever your number was, and let time do its thing, like, it's just amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I'll never forget the day I realized I was a millionaire. Like, it was so cool. Like, you just, like, you build your spreadsheet and you're like, holy crap, I'm a millionaire.
Yep.
And then, if you keep doing what you're doing to get there, it won't be long and you'll be worth $2 million, and then you'll be worth $3 million. And then you're like, what the hell? Like, that was easier than the first one.
Yeah.
My buddy Eddie Speed says, there's transactional income and there's wealth, and you have to always focus on it, make sure one's not growing faster than the other. And so in this business, it gets a little addictive. Sometimes you can make 100 G's on something and you're like, yeah, but then you pay taxes on it. Like, and I say, like, why not keep that house and, let time. Because the other thing you have to realize is the first 3 to 5 years is the highest rate of growth of any asset you buy, right? Because you do a value add, right? Well, most time you do. So it really makes a lot of sense to hold the asset for a couple years and then reposition the asset and the capital that you have in it and the equity you've gained, because it's all about compounded growth. And I use the example of Warren Buffett. So in 1971, he bought a house in Laguna Beach for $150,000, and he put 20% down and got a 7% mortgage. Yeah, so 5% isn't really high, people.
Yeah,
Warren Buffett did it. And when asked, he said that he got the mortgage because he figured he could make more than 7% with that money. And he kind of used the example with that money. He was buying Berkshire Hathaway stock back then for he said he probably bought like 3,000 shares with that money. It was like $4,000 a share. It was either 4,000 or 3,000. But anyway, he did the math real quick, and he's like, so those shares that I bought then are now worth $750 million. The house is worth 11. $750 million, right? Almost $1 billion. So At the same time point, though, if in 1971, if you bought a house in Mesquite, Texas, you'd have paid about $10,000 to $12,000 for it. Well, that house is worth $300,000 now, right? So it's actually the same percent growth. They're both 7,500%. It's just one started with a bigger number, so it grew bigger. And so where I'm at now is value add, operate until you're into long-term capital gains, and then either sell or refinance. Big fan of refinancing because that's tax-free growth capital. But don't refinance and buy a car, right?
Right.
Use that equity to create more equity to compound faster. And so like our average home in our portfolio now is worth over probably $650,000, $700,000, and we're cash flowing as rentals, right? So somebody's like, "Oh, I have 100 doors." It's like, yeah, but they're in Columbus and they're all worth $70,000, right? Like, the same guy could have $10 million houses. So
Yeah.
I don't ever get into numbers.
It's less headache in that instance, but it's comparative.
Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to cycle your equity. You have to, because the bigger asset value, net asset value you can get to, the faster it will start growing for you with time. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
So do you have a certain time frame in which so for instance, kind of start bottom of cycle. So you acquire the asset and then you acquire the property. And then from there, you do whatever you need to do, fix it up, rent it out. And then are you looking 3-5 years somewhere in there? Say, okay, I'm going to refinance this and do it again with that same amount. Or do you look, is that about the time where you look and say, hey, or do you ever try to pay it down, like pay the debt down and just not refinance? Is that like what kind of things? Everybody has their different ways of doing stuff. I hear some people are like, I try to pay everything down as much as I can. And some are like, I'm going to reuse the capital.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So that's where Scott and I differ in opinions because Scott was all about get them paid off. Leverage is key, and debt equity does nothing for you, right? It can produce a return. It can. I mean, you can have cash flow, but I feel like number one, I'm a proponent of responsible leverage, right? I don't think you should over lever. I think a 1.2 to 1.25% debt service coverage ratio is very responsible. So if your payment on that house, if your rent on that house is $1,200, I don't feel like your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and any homeowners associations should be above $1,000, right? So 1.2 times 1,000 is $1,200. That's what a debt service coverage ratio is. So I like a 1.3 or 1.4 personally for my portfolio. And so my factors, my criteria is if it will support more debt responsibly, I'll take it. If it won't, I won't. Then once you've owned the asset for say 3 or 4 years, so normally I buy the house, fix the house, and then refi it 90 to 120 days in, get my money back out,
right,
and then let time do its thing. 3 to 5 years, you're into that deal. You kind of hit the peak exit around 5 years, I feel like. I mean, if you're not in a down market, then obviously not. That's another reason I only get 30-year fixed rates like we sell at RCM, because if we do hit a down market, like you don't have to.
Yeah,
Number one,
safe.
nobody can call the loan due. Like these are non-callable loans, right? And number two, my rate can't change, right? My taxes will change, my insurance will change, but my rent will change, but my rate can't. So anyway, to answer your question, then I started evaluating other options. So one of the things I did recently, so I had this house in Grand Prairie. This was a fun one. I bought it for like $115,000, $120,000 back in 2019. We spent $15,000 or $20,000 fixing it up. I don't know. Been renting it out for anywhere from $1,600 to $1,800 a month since 2019, and it went vacant in February. They bought a house. So I hadn't seen the house in forever, and my wife had never seen the house. But what I remembered was I didn't really like the neighborhood, and it didn't have a garage, and it had like a lot of siding. It just didn't fit my 322 brick mentality that I now have in nicer neighborhoods. I was like, so honey, we'll go out and there's that new restaurant you want to eat at in Bishop Arts. We'll go out there on a Saturday and then just pop over to Grand Prairie and check it out. We get over there. She's like, oh no, I hate this neighborhood. Like, and there's no garage. Like, there's a lot of things about the neighborhood, but also the house is now worth $260. Right? I'm in it for like $130. I think my loan on it was like $120 at that time. So, there's a lot of equity sitting there, and really feel like it may be at the top of the market. So then we just run numbers, right? Like, this math is your friend. I mean, like, our society doesn't know how to do it anymore, but math is your friend. So I start running numbers. I'm like, all right, well, MLS, what can we do? Well, probably only go for 235 right now. Now looks like those numbers have recovered a little with going into the summer, but this was in February, right? So it's only probably 235 right now. We're gonna have to spend 30, 35, like, to get that. So, shoot, you're probably only walking away with 190, 180. That sucks. Never mind that. And then I started looking at renting it again, and they had already done the make ready. We're probably gonna get $1,850 a month. And that works, right? I already had 30-year fixed on it. I was like, okay, that's the better option than MLS. But since I go to all these masterminds and I talk to all these people, and I just still am a student of the game, I'm like, honey, we ought to owner finance this thing. And she goes, why? I was like, it's a great working class neighborhood. It's got a huge backyard, the driveway. You can just drive right back in there and store your trailers and your trucks. I was like, it's move-in ready right now. We ought to owner finance it. She's like, well, all right, well, let's talk about, the numbers. And so what I did is, because I'm big into cash flow, I'm also big into reinvestment. I called my buddy Jesse that does a lot of owner finance, realtor stuff for me. And I was like, hey, man, look at this house. The pictures on Zillow are up to date. Tell me what you think you could sell it for. And he's $2,500 a month. I was like, all right, cool. So I kind of put the taxes in. I kind of put the insurance in. And it tells me that I can sell it for around $250, $255 if I charge 9%, 9.99% interest. A lot of owner finance people right now are charging 11% interest. I'm only targeting the payment. But what I did, because I knew I needed to pay off the 30-year mortgage because of the due on sale clause. I don't ever violate those. Yeah. And you should not either as a lender. I'm telling you. So we sold it for $258. I got $25,000 down, $25,800. Yeah, 10%, exactly 10%. And so then I'm left with, 200 and, what is it? What's 258? I gotta say this right. Otherwise the math people out there are gonna be like, hey, Mr. Math, you didn't do it right. So then I got $232,200 left in owner finance loans at 9.99% interest. So I was like, I kind of pencil it out. I was like, honey, we could just pay off the mortgage with cash, and then the cash flow in this be really good. It'd be like, I think $1,800 a month, I think. Or I was like, I could do a split note. She goes, what's that? I said, I'll show you. Hang on. And we could just sell the first, use that money to pay off the existing lien, and keep the second for cash flow. And then said, we'll have 60, 70 grand worth of cash that we can go redeploy. Because she wants to buy some more midterm and corporate rentals. So what I did is I created a $180,600 first lien that I've already sold for $170,000. It closes next week. So I'll put $50K in my pocket there, right? And then of the down payment, make sure I do my math right. So then I keep a $51,600 second lien myself at 9.99. So the payment on that, the cash flow is $457, which is more cash flow than I was making as a rental.
Yeah.
Right. And I got like $16,000 or so of the down payment after I paid commissions and closing costs. So it's like, okay, coupled together, I put 60, 65,000 net cash in the bank. It's close to 70, I think, is the way it's going to shape out. And then I get to keep. So I can go redeploy that. That's more than enough for a down payment on the next house that I can buy at today's numbers, right, in a nicer neighborhood. We're actually looking out by the airport. And then I still get the cash flow, right? I still get this second lien. And now I've got these investors that love me because I'm the second lien position behind the first.
Mm-hmm.
So they feel really good that Tim Herriage isn't walking away from a $50K second lien if this guy defaults.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to step in and have to redeem them. Right. I'm going to have to, I'm going to get my money.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm coming from mine.
Yeah. I mean, and so then the idea is maybe they refi in a couple of years. Who knows? But the point is, we kept the cash flow. Now, I don't like owner financing as investing.
Mm-hmm.
It is not investing. It is transactional money. And Eddie Speed and I like to fight about that. But because it's a declining income stream with a declining asset base.
That's where I've struggled. So I've gone, because we've talked about that, because I'm like, well, we've talked about maybe we sell this owner finance and we can just, do the cash flow. But I struggle with that because I'm like, it bothers me because I don't get any equity. Like, that's it. Once it's sold, it's done. Like, there's no more.
Your net worth goes down every month.
Yes.
And your income.
Yes. So like, I don't get the appreciation. I said that wrong. I don't get the appreciation on it. And that frustrates me to go, it's a lot of damn work to not get. Yeah. I want that. And that's something that it's kind of mentioning that, like, I want to see what your thoughts are on this. So her and I started it was part-time investing over the years in like 2010. That's when we really started. It was just it was a way for us to build our retirement as we built our martial arts academy. That's really what it was. So it was never a full-time deal. Full-time didn't come till many, many years later, when we're like, okay, now let's take a leap. But, and we didn't have a lot of mentors. We just learned on our own and just kind of, I hear your story. I'm like, damn, that would have been awesome to just to be on the back end of that. That sounds like my jiu-jitsu. That's how it was for jiu-jitsu for me. I was in your case, but in jiu-jitsu, but to be on the real estate side of things and to see that would have been awesome. Like the stories, like that's why I asked those questions. But it sounds like to me what I heard and some of the individuals I've known and just talked to, that at one point investing was about appreciation, right? It was about equity. And it seems like later now it's all about the cash flow, and the younger generation is talking more. Do you hear that? I
hear that, but I'll tell you that it's about all of it, right?
It should be.
One of my favorite books ever is The Richest Man in Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the money principles in it are just so timeless and simple. And when you think about it, look, why am I selling that house we were just talking about in Grand Prairie?
Yeah.
I feel like, number one, I've already gained $100,000 in value, right? Mm-hmm. Number two, it does not fit my long-term desires. Number three, we feel like we can capitalize on opportunities in today's market that will compound the equity much quicker. So if you think about it, right now, you can buy a house in DFW for $350 that was selling for $450 last year.
Mm-hmm.
And those times will come back.
Right.
So if I can, and by engineering it the way I did, we actually kind of captured all the money,
Yeah.
And then I get to go redeploy it. So, but if I wasn't going to redeploy it, I would not do that.
Mm.
So I think owner finance is great if you have a way, like you can sell partials, or you just sell like the first 5 years of the income stream or whatever, and then go redeploy that money. And then you still have the note like after that's over. So owner finance is great for that. Owner finance is great for cash flow, but you just have to understand that from an accounting perspective, every month, the net present value, what they owe you, goes, or the unpaid principal value, I can't say anything right. Unpaid principal balance goes down every month.
Right.
And the amount of your income or the interest they're paying you goes down every month.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a declining income stream with a declining asset base. It's still cash flow.
And then you can't determine when they're going to pay it off. So.
History says in 7 years.
Yeah.
Which is why we made amortizations in America.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Just the human behavior is to move every 7 years, a 7-year itch, whatever you want to call it. Like, bottom line is every 7 years people move on.
We're going to get the most we can up front so that
That's why the sweet spot is always to sell a note around year 5.
Gotcha.
because there's still enough interest left in it to make it where maybe you're not taking a huge haircut, but you've sucked a lot of interest out of it.
Yeah. I like the way you explain that. You're like, hey, I've never heard it explained that way, where you're like, hey, it's just the declining. Because everybody talks about, oh man, if you owner finance, you'll make all this, cash flow. But the way you explain it is like, you're actually losing. You're making money, but you can't. On the back end, there's no appreciation. You just said it's declining. That describes it perfectly. That's why it bothers me. I'm like, it's declining, and I feel that. But to hear that,
and you're young,
yeah. To hear that, it's like,
I'm 45. I'm not that old. If I owner financed my entire portfolio, I'd be out of houses at 75.
Mm-hmm. That
sucks.
Yeah.
Right? Now, as long as you're taking that money and moving it into assets that, so like that $265,000 house, I don't think it keeps going up 3 to 5% a year. I think, that neighborhood may be topping out like for a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know if I go over this other neighborhood right now, I'm buying, a primo asset at a discount to what I feel like it's worth. And what everybody else has to understand, you guys have kids?
Yep. 2 kids.
How old?
8 and I was about to say 9 and 10. About to be 8 and 10.
All right. So the crazy thing is there will come a time that you guys have passed on and your kids have these houses and they're sitting around talking to someone and they're like, God, can you believe mom and dad used to buy these houses for less than $1 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just math.
Yep.
The appreciation, and you don't ever want to be the old guy in the room, right? And I make fun of myself about that because I still have some tendencies to be the old guy in the room. But think about it. Houses in Mesquite were built for $10,000 in the 50s.
Right.
They're worth $300,000. And there was a time where the old guy in the room was like, oh man, I can't believe you're paying more than $50,000 for that house.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a time, can't believe they're getting more than $100,000 for that house. 150's crazy, 200's crazy, 250's crazy. Well, Jesus, maybe we're all wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
At some point.
I mean,
it just keeps going up. It won't stop going up, damn it.
The chart is undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the beautiful thing. I think inflation is a shell game that no one can win. It's guaranteed to happen, and here's why.
Mm-hmm.
Every year, there are more people on Earth than there were the year before. Every year, they live longer, which means they work longer. And every year, someone works at a job or in a career or in an industry, they want to make more money.
Right.
So just by definition, you are going to have more money just to pay people because there's going to be more of them working and making more money and needing more money and working longer to make more money.
It's a cycle. It has to keep going up.
The math says it must go up.
Yeah.
Or you have to enter into a society where you're bartering.
Right.
Okay. Well, here's why we can't barter. Do you know why? Government doesn't know how to tax that shit.
Yeah.
Right. Like you come over to my house, over to my house and wash my truck, and then I come over to your house and then paint your house.
Yeah.
They can't tax that.
Yeah.
And if you can't tax it, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like
It's illegal.
I'm going to send you a 1099 for the drive. You know, I mean, come on. So look, I mean, we'll never be in a barter situation.
Yeah.
I mean, universal wages and all that. Like in every generation, I mean, y'all know in the 70s, right? Russia was going to kill everyone. These damn hippies were ruining the country, right? And there was a drug crisis and blah, 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 blah. Nothing got ruined. Nobody got nuked.
Yeah.
I mean, and guess what? Houses went up in value. Interest rates went down. The world's great.
Yeah.
So I don't believe in fear. It's like human behavior tells you that, a buddy of mine said, we ran an extensive survey and most people prefer to live indoors. Like, I
think I would agree to that.
I mean,
anybody in here that
food, water, and shelter, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, it's
check the yes box on.
Yeah. So like the big corporations, everyone wants to talk about how many houses the corporations own. They still own less than 2% of the housing stock. They're irrelevant.
Yeah.
They own like 50% of the farmland. That's relevant,
Yeah.
right? And then water, I don't know how to make water. I don't know how to profit off of water. I mean, I guess we drill a well. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to run out of this shit before the earth catches on fire. I mean, so like food, water, and shelter. Like, so I choose to make sure my investments are, and we saw it in COVID, right? Like, what happened? We gave people money so they could pay their rent. We gave people money so they could pay their mortgage.
So they bought Xboxes and shit.
Hey, you know what though? My portfolio has never been at that high of an occupancy and that low of a delinquency rate for that long.
Yeah.
Because people were flush with cash and they needed to make sure they had a place to live.
Yep. Yeah.
So
it's a necessity. You invest into a necessity, not something that's just like, oh, we can just get rid of it.
So I don't even remember the question, but that's what I wanted to talk about. Just tangent.
Let it loose, man. I'm good with that. So let me ask this, because you mentioned 600, like the just kind of average home price. What did you start out early on in the 100,000? Obviously, we're talking 2000. So you started. I'll just say lower.
Back in the old days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't throw a number because I look at some of those homes. I'm like, yeah, right. There we go. First time home buyer pricing. So did you start out there, and at what point did you start making the transition from the first time home buyer pricing area into more of a, I don't want to say luxury, but just a much higher price point?
After I met Nick.
Yeah.
I was anti-debt, not anti-debt, but I was still wanting to be like Scott Horne, like, oh my God, I wanted to own 40 houses free and clear before I was 40. That was my goal.
Yeah.
And like now I think that's a stupid goal.
Yeah.
Like it would be a dumb move, right? Like if you own 40 free and clear and you got a 50, 60% loan against them, you could go buy another 100 houses. Like, why would you want to do, like, it's, or you could go buy an apartment complex or something like that. Right. Like, I think, when I got around the guys at Blackstone and really started looking at IRRs and cash flow calculations and all that, I started learning that, especially if you have fixed rate debt, like it's just a DSCR calculation to make sure that the debt's okay. And if you can get that money and then buy another house, or get that money and invest in a multifamily syndication or a commercial office syndication, it just makes perfect sense. Like like Buffett said on that interview, I figured I could do better than 7% with the cash. And that just makes sense to me, right? Like if I have the cash, I know that I can go buy something that I'm going to make a lot more than that debt cost me. So it just started. And then with the bigger houses, once you're no longer trying to cash flow these things, like it's not really about the cash flow, it's about the equity growth. Well, you realize the bigger houses are just easier to manage. Like we've got a couple of rentals that are, $2,300-$2,500 a month here in DFW. Like that's a decent little neighborhood. They're fully leased. You never hear from the people. They have a yard service to mow their own yard, and then like the lower end stuff, I'll never forget this house in Mesquite. This lady calls and says, there's something wrong with the faucet, the water hose won't work and all this. And so I sent my contractor at the time. We had a full-time GC. I was like, hey, go check this out. But he sends me a picture of, did he send me a picture? I don't think so. I don't think we had cell phones back then. I think he may have recorded it on a camera and brought it to me. I don't want to be untrue. Anyway, he recorded it somehow. He did not send me a picture because this was like 10 years ago. I think I had a BlackBerry back then. The lady had taken the soaker hose that was around the house and picked it up and was trying to like water the plants with the soaker hose.
Oh gosh.
Shaking it.
And she was like, the hose is broken. I'm like, no, sweetie, you are. Like, this is not normal.
We sent the GC out there for that shit.
It was one of those things that you're like, I hate this shit. No, so like, We refinance houses. We've invested in some multifamily deals. We've invested in some commercial deals. We really started catering to like corporate rentals, corporate relocations, midterm housing, 30 to 180 days. So we buy nicer houses in nicer neighborhoods where people that are moving here from California, waiting a year for their house to be built, and they just put millions of dollars in their pocket, and they're cool paying $12,000 a month for a fully furnished, nice house, all bills paid, and in the school district where they're trying to move to. That's another huge thing.
The school
Right.
district, yeah.
Yeah, because they can move into a good house and go ahead and get an address and go ahead and get their kids enrolled. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's less headaches by moving into that realm and away from so moving into that realm, the 600,000 plus, it was just less headaches for you guys.
Yeah, I got 3 houses now. Let's see, they're probably 1.6 to 1.8 million, just those 3 houses.
Mm-hmm.
The net cash flow per month is $20,000 net after the manager, after all bills are paid. Net.
Yeah, that's nice.
So would that be more business for self-storage then? Because if they're moving and building and they're moving into a fully furnished property for a year, where's all their stuff?
Yeah.
By the way, here's our flyer for the self-storage when you're at it.
I love self-storage as an investment.
I was going to ask you that. Like, what are your thoughts as far as what you prefer? Like, I know when we talked to Jawad, he was like, fuck multifamily. I don't want to touch it. He told us the story of the hookers and stuff like that.
Yeah, but he made a ton of money there. He did. It's,
So what are your thoughts on, like, what do you prefer? Everybody has their thing. Like, I like this and I like that. Not that you wouldn't do something else, but what's your, like, hey, that's my bread and butter. I love that.
Right now, it's investing in office in industrial syndications. That's my jam. I still get the depreciation. I've got a couple trusted operators that I trust.
Yeah.
That every time I have an extra 50 or 100K, I just drop it in there on their next deal. They and everybody else is afraid of office right now.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're investing with the right people that have been around the block a time or two, like they know the mitigants, they know how to get the long-term debt, they know how to, look at the corporate tenancy, and it's just math.
Yeah.
Right. So I like that. I love my midterm rental stuff. It's fun to own a $800,000 house that you're getting $12,500 a month for, and you already have $400,000 in equity in it.
Yeah.
Right. Like literally, like some of these houses people buy, that would be 10 houses.
Right?
Right?
You're doing it in one deal.
Yeah.
It's taking you a lot less time.
So again, it's leverage. It's multiplying. Now, one of the reasons I like self-storage is so where I live in Rockwall, my son plays baseball up in McKinney. So a lot of times we're driving through like Lavon and Farmersville and like all these little small towns. And you see like the dude that bought 20 acres and put up like 50 storage units. You're like, oh,
yeah,
man, because it's on a main artery. It's on a corner. Like, I love the idea that self-storage isn't that expensive. And I've told my wife I want to build some. And you could just buy it, build it, or you could buy the land, build the property, and the depreciation and the cash flow is going to offset it. What I don't like is you either got to build big enough to have an on-site manager, or there's a lot of headaches that come with that. I was down in Coleman, Texas this weekend at my deer lease, and my buddy Travis Bockham down in Waco texted me. He's like, "What are you doing in Coleman?" I was like, "I hunt down here." He's like, "We own all the self-storage there." I'm like, "Yeah, I think it's awesome." I mean, but I don't want management. I don't want headaches. One of the things I love about my single-family rentals is Renters Warehouse does a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Of leaving me alone. Right?
Just don't talk to me.
Yeah, just send me my checks,
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let me ask this. So before we wrap up here in a bit, I wanted to ask I always ask this question to any of the guests, like, I don't want to call it worst deal. Maybe it could be worst deal, it could be challenging deal. The one that just sticks out where you're like, it has a little burn to it that makes you, there was a big lesson in that. Because, a lot of people, when they go on different, podcasts, the host is like, oh, well, what's your best? And like, but I mean, those aren't the lessons, right? Those are the home runs. Like, fuck yeah, I made a lot of money. But versus the one where it's like that one burned and I remembered it and it made me never do this again. You know, what was that for you?
308 Forest Grove, Richardson, Texas,
Oh, let me grab
75080.
let me grab my phone. It's no.
This, I was training a new buyer. This was probably back in, I don't know, 06, 07 time frame. And I was showing off with my new employee. And I go in, I buy this house, and we're doing the demo, and everything's going right. Ah, crap, we're going to have to replumb the entire house. All right, fine. Hey, Tim, you check the square footage. I thought you said this was 3,000 square feet. Yeah, it doesn't feel like that. No, it's tax rolls. Go do what you're supposed to do. Turns out that the county had made an error on the tax rolls, and it had a converted garage, but they still had it listed as a garage, and they had included the square footage in the living. So when you looked at it on paper, it said the house was like 2,800 square foot or so and had a 450 square foot garage. Well, this was in a $130 a square foot neighborhood, right? So like I'm $50K off like from the jump on my comps. But then I try to rehab my way out of it, right? Like make it the nicest house in the neighborhood, would replumb it, the foundation was a nightmare. And then I made the fatal mistake. Well, everything took way too long. So I think Scott may have been the hard money lender on that. He made more money than I ever could have. I paid $80,000 in interest and points over a year. Well, then when you look at it, we get it done, and I list it like way higher than it ever should have been because I was trying to make my money back, right? Yeah. And you just look at like all the fights with my wife and all the arguments with my team and all the just anguish that occurred. Like if I just said, damn it, you're right. Let's under rehab this thing, get out of it. Like take a loss now. Like I probably would have made, not made. I probably would not have lost at least 50 grand of what I did lose. We lost well over $250,000 on that one house. Just from arrogance, from stupidity, from ego, from not wanting to acknowledge your mistakes. And then the other one that comes to mind is this property on Cedar Brush. I want to say it's like 4,000-ish Cedar Brush. I don't remember. This is in August 07. We bought it off of MLS for $300K. And I had a guy offer me 3.25. And then I had another, and then I was like, no, man, I'm gonna get more than that. So I end up having under contract on an assignment for $380. I'm gonna make 80 grand. And then the subprime meltdown happens, and the guy's name was Al. He was a attorney. Calls and says, man, I can't buy it. I was like, no, man, like I got your $5 grand. Like you're gonna buy it. He's like, dude, you can keep the $5 grand. I'm not buying it. I was like, whatever, dude. So I call Phil Carter back. And I'm like, Phil, hey, you know what? I decided I'm going to take your offer. 3.25. Let's go. Nah, man. I'm not buying it. That market's dead. Very, very key. I was like, tell you what, I got $5 grand from this other dude. I'll take $5 grand off. I'll take 320. He goes, dude, you're not listening. That market's dead. I'm like, man, whatever. I go ahead and close on it. Go ahead and start fixing it up, right? Put it on MLS. I think I sold it for 300 after spending like 25 and then plus commissions. So the funny thing is it was a point in the market where I was no longer operating on relationships. I was operating only on max profit because I could have sold that thing to Phil and it would have been his problem because he closed like in a week. So instead, it's a $100,000 swing because I was gonna make 80 and ended up losing like 30, like in a month, like, and so you just remember those things, right? And that was a bigger house than I normally did, and all that, and I'm in one right now. I mean, I bought this house. It's a big historic house in Rockwall. I bought it for $550. Spent about $350 gutting it out and redoing the whole thing. It's a 150-year-old historic house, 3/4 of an acre. I fought with the city council. I fought with the historic district. I called people frauds. I really
Mhm.
dug in. And here we are. Now it's on Airbnb, making decent money. But to refinance it, because I think I owe like $650 on it. I figured it's $1 million house, probably only appraised at like 700 right now. I'm in it for 850, 900. So I'd probably have to bring another like 200 grand to closing, and that's probably what's going to have to happen. And my wife's like, "Why don't we just sell it?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm keeping it."
Yeah.
But we had the conversation this weekend, and I said, "Look, if it was someone else, I would tell them to sell the house. I would tell them to cut bait, get their money back, go reinvest." So, but I want to tell you why I don't want to sell the house. She goes, "Okay, go." I said, "Number one, we have the money to do the deal.
Mhm.
Number two, this is the most historic home in our hometown. If we sell it, we will never have the opportunity to buy it back.
Yep.
It's on 3/4 of an acre. We have made it a beautiful home, and this is a legacy property. I believe in this property. I believe it's worth, if I had to pay another $600,000 cash just to keep it, I would. So, but I was open if she didn't agree with me that I would sell it. But she was like, I agree. She
Yeah.
goes, I feel the exact same way.
The family that originally had the property is probably feeling the way you feel, going, damn, I wish I would still have that in the family.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we would.
It's a one of a kind, unique home, and the numbers work.
Yeah. I grew up in a farmhouse. So I grew up in a farmhouse that in Irving, there's a farmhouse that my great grandfather actually built. They built that. I'm sorry. No. Yeah. It was great grandfather. But they rebuilt it in 1929, and that whole house still stands, and it's part of Irving Heritage. They owned so much land. So like just to kind of hear you talk about that, like they owned everything from 183 and even a little further up, like Rochelle, all the way down to like Pioneer, O'Connor, MacArthur. It was a whole farm. It was a shit ton of land, and they ended up selling it all off, but they kept that house. That house will never leave our family. I look at that. I'm like, I don't want to be that one at the end where you would be the guy that buys it. I'm like, damn, wish I would have kept that. There's somebody on the back end going, I wish I would have kept that house.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I, we even talked, like where we live now, we bought it right before COVID and built we bought my in-laws house and we built them a little in-law suite behind it and then like added a pool and a cabana and then gutted the house. And because they were in their 80s and they needed to be cared for. Well, then COVID happened and it was like such a great blessing. But we know that it's not our house. We don't want to live there.
Right.
Right. And it's in Rockwall. So, the beautiful thing is the way we structured it, like her brother and sister will reap in the appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
We told them what we were going to do is we used all the money they got to build the stuff. Like we used their money to build their stuff. And then we put a bunch of it back so that they'd have money to operate because they just couldn't keep up with the taxes and all that,
Yeah.
But so what we told them is like, after they both pass away and my youngest gets out of high school, well, then we'll just sell the place and we'll divvy up the proceeds and everybody wins. Cause we bought it below market and all that. Well, my wife and I were talking this weekend, like I may want to move into that historic house. It's right on the town square.
Mm-hmm.
It's super cool. Right. I mean, we literally designed, it's on 3/4 of an acre downtown. Like it's the nearest bar is 100 yards. Like It's cool. Maybe commercial one day, maybe an office. I don't know.
A law office. Those are popular in Fort Worth.
Dude, it would be a great law office, title company, attorney's office. It would be killer. But for now, I mean, I think we got someone staying there right now paying us $450 a night. I mean,
yeah, that's badass. That's awesome.
But it's still a mistake.
Yeah,
it's not advisable. I mean, you have to have deep pockets and thick skin to do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're just getting started, if someone that was new or getting started or maybe not didn't have the resources I have, that's the type of deal that probably kill them. Yeah, not kill them, but kill their business. So you talked about workforce housing or affordable first-time homebuyer housing bracket. I'm a huge believer that is when you're getting started where you need to stay. 70 to 90% of the median home price of the area operate in that price band. There's always an FHA loan available. right? So there's for first-time home buyers, right? There's always an FHA loan available, and typically you can cash flow those properties if you need to rent them out.
Yeah.
Absolutely believe in that.
You can do it quick.
Yeah.
Usually they can turn fast, and you don't have to worry. They're not gonna. You're not gonna wait a while to get a tenant. You're not gonna be like, oh shit.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Well, man, I loved having you on. It's and obviously I know your podcast is a great podcast. I've listened to it as well. We've listened to it too.
Yes.
So it's uncontested investing.
Yes,
I just know RC and Capital. I watch on YouTube. So, but definitely if you guys get a chance to listen to that, a lot of great information. Definitely some great guests you've had on. So I know on the podcast, as being a host, you really don't get to tell your story as much and talk. It's the other way around. So that's why I said I want to hear what your story is and what you've got going on, because I think that's where there's a lot of value in that too. So,
and I'll tell you this, and I know you're trying to wrap up, but like if people out there listening, like make sure you give this guy a rating, a review, share it, like because so much goes into this.
Yeah.
And then like I tell you personally, for my show, I love watching it every Tuesday morning when it comes out, because when you're interviewing, so much of you're worried, you're trying to like, what do I need to say next? What's my time like? I need to remember to talk about that. Like sometimes you miss like really cool stuff that the person says. And so when it comes out every Tuesday morning, my routine, I grab my coffee, I hit it on the big screen in the TV. My wife makes fun of me, like, watching yourself again. I'm like, yeah, I am, because I'm proud of what I put out. And like, I want to like hear it again, like, because
actually absorb it.
Do you experience this one sometimes when we get done? We're like, what was said? Like there's parts and pieces that go on where like I'm like and sometimes I don't watch myself back where I should, but there's parts and pieces where like I have certain interviews, like Jawad talked about getting in a fight in the parking lot with like getting that's stuff like that, and then there's other valuable pieces that we talk about. Scott Horne was all about figuring it out, and just kind of hearing that and the way he operates. Like to me, I really hope to see myself like Scott when I'm 65. That's that's kind of what I look. I'm like, that I hope is going to be me at 65.
I think he's next week's episode for me, or the week after.
Is he?
Yeah.
We walked out of there and I was like, that was awesome.
Yeah, like, you can't remember everything that was said, so it's like I enjoy sitting down and being the listener on Tuesday mornings, and I'm my biggest critic. I always am. Like I tell the RCM folks all the time, like, look, I think it sucked. I need to do this different. And they're like, dude, it was great. I'm like, nah, I don't want to hear that. Like, because I don't believe in perfection. Like there's no such thing, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, so I'm always trying to grow. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to improve everything I touch. I feel like that's been my secret formula to overnight success in 23 years is I have no problem saying, telling the truth and saying when I don't understand something or when I don't know something. I'm always learning. And if you're always learning, because like you, I learn everything I learn something on every episode. Mm-hmm. I have a takeaway. I have an aha moment. I have an affirmation. Like I am a learner. And I think we have to make sure that we keep learning, even after we're considered the pro.
Yeah, I agree.
Stay relevant.
We walk away every episode, whether it's listening to someone else or just whatever. While we're doing this, like I always walk away. I know we'll go eat lunch here in a minute and just go, damn, something clicked. Yeah, and it may not click that very moment. It might be 24 hours later, and it's like, I remember he said that. Oh, well, there it is. I figured it out, so.
Well, I appreciate y'all having me on.
Well,
I really do.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much for coming on. I know you're busy and got a lot to do, so I appreciate you taking the time out of the day to come and join us. So
thank you.
All right, guys. We'll catch you guys. Make sure, by the way, if you want to plug, before I bow out of this, RC and Capital, you want to plug RC and Capital, how to contact you or maybe your team, because they may not necessarily need to contact you.
No, hit me up. RC and Capital. We're the only one on all the socials, at Tim Herriage on all the socials. Send me a DM, email me. Tim@timherriage.com is the easiest way to remember, because if you can figure out how to spell it, but it'll probably be in front of you when you hear this. I'm happy to connect with anybody. I have calls all the time. I'll send you a link. We can have a 15-minute conversation. don't waste it. And don't be surprised when it's over in 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, and check out this podcast too, guys. Uncontested Investing. Is it on iTunes as well?
It's
or?
everywhere. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I YouTube is where I catch it. So it's as much as I'm on iTunes a lot, but that one I catch on YouTube. So definitely your podcast. So check that out, guys, as well. And thank you very much for being on, and we'll catch you guys next time.